Good morning. I'm Julie Nauman. I'm the Executive Officer of the California Victim Compensation Program. And I want to thank you for joining us today at our digital town hall. We're coming together today during Sexual Assault Awareness Month to discuss a very important issue, and that is the issue of military sexual assault. And as we commemorate the Sexual Assault Awareness Month in April every year, this year we felt it was quite important to bring attention to the fact that sexual assault takes place in many areas of life, including, unfortunately, in the armed forces. I'd like to share some statistics with you to just kind of set the stage for our conversation today. In 2014, sexual assault, harassment, and retaliation persisted for both men and women service members, and actually the statistics show that there really hasn't been any significant improvement since 2010. 20,000 service members experienced at least one sexual assault during 2014. And that's 1 in 20 women, about 4.9%, and 1 in 100 men. Retaliation, unfortunately, is also exceedingly high. So we know that 3 in 5 women, or 62%, who reported a sexual assault then experienced professional, social, or administrative retaliation or punishment. And the majority of those that were retaliated against faced reprisal from superiors and from commanders. In response to this situation, an assembly bill passed through the California legislature. We refer to it as AB 2545. Very important piece of legislation established that active duty military personnel who are sexually assaulted by other military personnel on or after the effective date of January 1, 2015, shall be considered for eligibility with the Victim Compensation Program, regardless of whether they reported the incident to a superior officer or to a law enforcement agency. This is a very important change in California law, and a change that we'll be talking about during our conversation today. For those of you that are listening on the phone or listening through the webcast, I want to let you know that we do have staff here on hand in Sacramento to take your questions from live chat and social media. So when you submit your questions, we'd just like to ask you if you would just include a first name and a city so we know who we're talking to and where you're listening from. I'd now like to introduce our panelists for today's session. Participating remotely is Ann McCarty, and Ann is the Associate Director of the North County Rape Crisis and Child Prevention Center. Here in Sacramento with me to my immediate left is Lindsey Sin. Lindsey is the Deputy Secretary for Women Veterans Affairs at the California Department of Veterans Affairs. And to her left is Mica Mione. Mica is a member of the CalVCP family, and she is a manager and specializes in training. I'd like to ask each of the panelists to begin with a short statement, to give us a little background of your work, your organization, and just a few thoughts on this issue. So let me start with Lindsey.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for calling in and joining us and viewing this webcast. This is a very important topic that the California Department of Veterans Affairs, along with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Defense, and service providers, nonprofit service providers and advocates take very seriously, because we do see that many service members and veterans are affected by military sexual assault. A little bit about me: I served 8 years active duty in the U.S. Navy, and after I came back home to Sacramento, started working with veterans in higher education, and then took this assignment on in late 2011. And since then, my area of expertise and what we cover at CalVET is women veterans specifically, but we've definitely, my office has gotten into the area of working with military sexual assault as how we can support survivors in California and how we can become advocates for survivors, because so many women are affected by this issue, although this is definitely something that both men and women experience in the military. So yes, the statistics are unfortunately disheartening, but hopefully through webcasts like this, through the work that we all do collectively, and through new improvements through legislation and new policies within Department of Defense, we see these numbers go down in the next several years. That's really the hope, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us today. Mica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. And again, thanks everyone for calling in, listening in. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to come together and discuss a very important issue during Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I am relatively new in my role here at CalVCP as the Manager of Training and Policy. For the last 20 years, I've had the honor to work with domestic violence survivors, sexual assault survivors, and child abuse victims. And throughout those 20 years, I've partnered multiple times with military bodies, with the reserves, with the National Guard to look at how family violence, interpersonal violence happens and affects military personnel, vets. So this is something that's dear and near to my heart, and I feel very proud of the work that CalVCP is doing to support survivors of sexual assault.
Thank you, Mica. And Anne, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good morning. Thank you. My name is Anne McCarty. I'm the Associate Director for the North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center here in Lompoc, California. I've been with my agency since 1994, but more importantly, I have been married to an active duty airman for over 30 years. He served for 24 years, retired in 2006, and the military, I'm very steeped in military tradition and the life. So I feel like I have some inside knowledge when it comes to working with survivors, military survivors, because of my knowledge of the military. And because of that, I've done a lot of work locally and at the state level with groups to be able to go around to the state and talk about how we can strengthen military-civilian relationships. And I do that work through the Office of Victims of Crime, their Training and Technical Assistance Program. And I've done a lot of work with the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and we've really strengthened our ties throughout the years with our local military installation, which has been instrumental, I think, in working towards helping other nonprofits around the country understand the importance of having a connection with the military installation and the installation having a connection with their local nonprofit, so that we can bridge that gap, because our military members are living in local communities and not just on an installation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We appreciate you participating today and bringing your expertise to this conversation.
Thank you.
Well, panelists, let me kick it off, and I'm going to ask a general question and ask each one of you to respond to it, and then we'll follow up from there. So let's talk about what were the past challenges of military sexual assault. Lindsey, would you like to kick it off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, past challenges of military sexual assault, probably one of the biggest throughout the decades, is that it's something that's not really talked about. Just like sexual assault in civilian numbers in civilian society, it's highly underreported, and that remains an issue within the military as well. But additionally, when someone's sexually assaulted by another service member in the military, it could be somebody that outranks the individual that's assaulted. The perpetrator could be of a person of influence. So there's an addition of workplace violence, of a manipulation because of rank and duty that can kind of factor into the assault. So people tend to underreport it based on that. In addition to the fact that it really just affects unit cohesion so deeply that people don't feel comfortable reporting it, and retaliation remains an issue. So I think overall, some of the past challenges that now have to be addressed are, one, making sure that victims feel comfortable coming forward, and that the military focuses more on prevention and prosecution of perpetrators, which has not necessarily happened in the past because of such low reporting numbers and because of fear of retaliation by the victims. So,
Mica, give us your perspective on this.
Yeah, I would say that in the past at CalVCP, we required that victims of crime cooperate with law enforcement and submit crime reports to qualify for compensation. And due to the bill that Julie mentioned earlier, Bill 2545, military victims of sexual assault can now apply for compensation without that requirement. There are other forms of verification that we can use, and this is consistent with how we've dealt with other forms of interpersonal violence, such as domestic violence and human trafficking. So this is really taking a barrier that, you know, is part of our past and overcoming that barrier for military victims of sexual assault.
Great, appreciate that. Anne, would you like to weigh in on this this question of past challenges of military sexual assault?
I'd love to. It's kind of piggybacking on the not talking about it, you know, burying our heads in the sand and not dealing with the issue. The other barrier to not talking about it was that service providers couldn't talk about it either. We were bound by, you know, back before the SAPR program was stood up, we were speaking in basically in squeaks and warbles when, you know, if I had a survivor that contacted my local agency, I knew that there was only so many questions I could ask before I started raising red flags at the local installation. And the same held true for the individual in the Victim Witness Assistance Program on the installation. We couldn't have a cohesive, coherent conversation about a survivor. So with the SAPR program and with the different reporting options, we're now able to talk and make sure that we're both providing the best services possible to survivors of sexual assault in the military.
We've made some progress, but let's talk about resources. Each of you, maybe Lindsey, you can kick this off again too. What types of resources and benefits are available in your case through the Veterans Affairs Department specifically? What kinds of resources are available for veterans? You touched on that a little bit in your intro, but tell us more.
There's quite a bit available, and I would say that's really been a development of the last decade. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs that consists of the Health Administration, the Benefits Administration, and the U.S. Cemeteries, three distinct departments within the federal U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Both within the Health Administration and the Benefits Administration, there are resources and benefits available to survivors of military sexual assault. So on the Health Administration side, any veteran can go into a U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs hospital or clinic and seek services related to sexual assault in the military. They don't need to be eligible for health care because there is health eligibility typically that's based on years of service or income level. They don't need to be eligible or meet those eligibility requirements. They can go in and seek services. They can seek mental health counseling. They can seek health care related to the effects of the assault. Within the Benefits Administration, they can also apply for disability benefits related to the sexual assault. And the sexual assault does not have to have been reported in that case. There does not need to be a substantial amount of documentation in order to substantiate a claim for sexual assault. It can be something like a first-person testimonial now. It can be a second-person testimonial, say an individual was assaulted and their roommate knew about it or their friend knew about it, someone in their command knew about it. That person can write a statement in support of that. That said, there are still a very low amount of claims approved for disability for sexual assault, unfortunately, because of the threshold of reporting requirements and the evidence needed. That is slowly changing. In the last several years, there's been more developments to allow more people to apply for and be approved for those. But those are great benefits within U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. There's also a hotline specifically for women veterans that they can call. There's a hotline for suicide prevention and mental health care. These are all important because a lot of the effects of sexual assault unfortunately results in major mental health and health conditions for survivors, which most of us know.
Let me add on to that and then ask both Mica and Anne to comment. In addition to these resources that you've described, which are wonderful, and we hope that more people will take advantage, what are the challenges in getting the word out about the availability of these broad range of services and assistance available to victims?
Well, I know from our perspective, the challenges within the state Department of Veterans Affairs, my agency, as well as the federal Department of Veterans Affairs remain large because we try over and over again to make sure we're connected with veterans. But veterans may not want to be as connected with us initially. Some of the challenges that make it particularly interesting to get a hold of veterans so that we can let them know about their benefits, are that women in particular don't always identify as veterans. So we ask the question, have you ever served in the military? Not, are you a veteran? People, men and women, may not think they're eligible for benefits because of their terms of service, which just may not be true, especially in the case of seeking benefits for sexual assault. So over and over again, when we communicate to people that are serving or have served in the military, we let them know that they should always contact the state or federal VA in order to seek if they are eligible for benefits, because it may be the case.
Anne, why don't you take a crack at this question about resources? Again, you operate throughout the state and very locally, as opposed to those of us that work here at the state level. Share with us other resources that you're aware of, and again, the challenges of helping victims know that these services and benefits are available to them.
Well, on the one hand, the resources that we have locally that are available to veterans and the services that we provide to military members are the same services that we provide to any survivors. One thing that I know that our local installation does very well, and that is the education piece and letting our active duty military members know what's available. The other thing that we do in our county is a veteran stand down once a year. We've been doing that for the last, we've done 2 or 3 now in our county, and it's been growing and growing and growing. So we're getting the word out that way. When we talk with military members, or veterans, we also let them know about militaryonesource.mil, which is a great military resource or a great resource for individuals, as well as the DoD Safe Helpline. The Department of Defense has been really advertising and trying to get the word out there about the DoD Safe Helpline, because no matter where you are in the world, you can either go online to the Safe Helpline website or call their 1-800 or their 877 number to find the closest SARC or military installation, or to get help if they're looking for resources locally and they don't know where to go. So even if they're living in our community and they don't know about a rape crisis center, they can contact the Safe Helpline and get routed to the nearest agency or the nearest SARC, much like the RAIN hotline. When people call that, it gets routed to the closest rape crisis center.
Great, thank you. Mica, your turn.
Well, in terms of resources, if a military victim of sexual assault applies for compensation and their application is approved, we pay for a wide range of expenses that are related to the crime. We pay for medical expenses, dental expenses, mental health, if there's some form of income loss, residential security, relocation, and other such expenses. And when I think about our challenges in reaching these victims or letting them know about compensation program, I think about all the California citizens that are deployed and how hard it is to reach out to those individuals, whether they're deployed somewhere else in the US or deployed overseas. Just how do we reach them? How do we let them know that even though you're not in California, you're still a Californian and you still can qualify for compensation?
And I think in the future, as we have come together for this training right now, we'll also be coming together to work on AB 2545, to work with the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and to work with the California National Guard to make sure that all of the resources for California military members and veterans are well publicized and communicated through all of our channels. I think that's going to go a long way to ensure that we are reaching as many people as possible. And active duty military and Guard and Reserve also have, as Anne mentioned, the SARC program, the Sexual Assault Response Coordinators in each command or installation that provide a variety of services, from victims advocacy to access to mental health care and physical health care, in addition to actually filing a report with law enforcement in the command to report the sexual assault. So there are quite a few protections available for members who have been assaulted while currently in service.
You mentioned the collaboration between our departments as well as with CalCASA, and that brings to mind the development that we have underway right now, the toolkit, where we're working both with CalCASA and with CalVET to develop this toolkit. So it's a group of facts and options and resources. So by collaborating together and pooling our resources, we're better able to reach those that we know we need to reach, and to really give them the information that they need in a way that they can easily access it. So that's an exciting opportunity that we've identified as a way to collaborate. Let's talk about looking ahead a little bit. And we've talked about the change in legislation, talked about the toolkit, but what more can we do to help victims? Are there other legislative changes or changes in the judicial process? What other barriers are there that, now that we've kind of gotten a good kickstart on this, how can we keep this effort going and really tear down those barriers? Thoughts?
Great question. I think that's the question that we think about every day when we come to work, is how do we reduce barriers for victims so they can really get to that pre-crime state, start going through that process of healing and recovery. And I think we are making huge strides through our changes in our domestic violence verification, human trafficking, and now military sexual assault. And this toolkit that both of you had just mentioned is going to be a huge opportunity to really educate the SARCs out there and to reach all the victims and let them know that they have options outside of the military. And even the military is making great strides at educating people about restricted versus unrestricted reporting options. So, that fear of confidentiality can be addressed. So I think even with the bill that has been passed, we have so much work to do to really educate people. I think Anne mentioned training and the power of training. We're really here at CalVCP taking advantage of conferences and outreach opportunities and community-based trainings and really leveraging our partnerships with the DA's offices throughout the state to reach more and more people, to inform them of these options and their rights.
Okay. Lindsey, thoughts about what more we can be doing, some specific steps?
Sure. For survivor support here in California, I think the best thing, as you mentioned, is training. So we can go a long way to know all of the resources available to a survivor when we interact with them, regardless of how we're interacting with them. A couple things we're going to do in the month of April and then in 2015. CalVET and Swords to Plowshares, which is a nonprofit, Bay Area-based nonprofit that works with veterans, will be hosting a webinar April 30th to train and give more resources to rape crisis centers. That's also available to anybody that wants to participate in the webinar. That's going to cover a lot of issues from active duty military sexual assault to some things that you may see in the way that survivors kind of report and exhibit behaviors, to options available to them within U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. We'll try and include some case studies as well with some collaborations we've already, or with what rape crisis centers have already done with military installations as well. And then we'll also have questions and answers, so this will be a good opportunity to receive pre-training. Additionally, we'll be participating in the National Sexual Assault Conference, which is held this year in September in Los Angeles. CalCASA is hosting it, so we will have several workshops focused on military sexual assault and survivor care. That really kind of helps address some of the issues with helping survivors really access the benefits they need here in the state. Other things still need to happen though. For instance, California is a mandatory reporting state, so when an individual goes to a hospital to have a rape kit done, if they don't want to file an unrestricted report, meaning they don't want law enforcement or their chain of command involved, it's very difficult for them to get a rape kit processed. So unfortunately, that would require major changes within the mandatory reporting, which unfortunately, mandatory reporting is an absolutely valuable protection for victims in sexual assault and domestic violence, but it does create a barrier for military members. Obviously, within the military itself, changes are still needing to be made to make sure that there is no more sexual assault in the military. That includes cultural changes within the military. That includes early and prevention and intervention. So bystander intervention, prevention of sexual assault, harsher prosecution for perpetrators. All of those are really key to making sure that this is something that is stopped within the military.
Good, good, good. Mica mentioned, and maybe I'll ask Ann to help clarify for us, what's the difference between restricted and unrestricted reporting in the case of military sexual assault? Ann, do you want to weigh in on that, and then other ideas for other things that we can do to tear down these barriers?
Sure. Unrestricted reporting in the military is the option that's recommended for victims of sexual assault who want an official investigation and command notification, in addition to the healthcare, the victim advocacy, and legal services. And a restricted report, or the restricted reporting option, is the option for adult victims of sexual assault who want to remain anonymous, who wish to have confidentiality, to disclose the crime to specifically identified individuals only, without triggering an investigation or notification to command. And in a restricted report, that notification or that disclosure can only be made to the SARC, the Sexual Assault Response Coordinator, the SAPR victim advocate, or a VA that has gone through the training and is on the installation, or a healthcare provider or personnel on the installation.
Are there protections in place then for the victim who does report, whether it's restricted or unrestricted? You know, the victim is not sure what to do and is, you know, obviously traumatized. What assurances can you give the victim that the protections are in place for him or her?
Well, under restricted reporting, they are limited due to the confidential nature of the reporting. There is the SAPR team assistance, so the SARC on the base would be assisting the survivor in a restricted report. And in our county, we can do and have done and will do a forensic exam. So the SARC on our installation notifies our sexual assault nurse examiner, and the sexual assault nurse examiner and the SARC and the rape crisis advocate come together for the forensic medical exam. And there is psychological counseling that is available, and the info is not put into their medical records, and they can receive counseling through us as well, and it still remains a restricted report. In unrestricted reporting, an individual can receive a military protective order, which is equivalent to a civilian restraining order. An expedited transfer may be available. The SAPR team is going to assist them from beginning to end. Once again, they can have the forensic medical exam and the counseling that is available to them.
That's impressive.
And now there's the Special Victims Council that is available to survivors as well.
Kind of like a victim witness in the civilian cases, helps the victim through the various steps and helps with protective orders and that kind of thing. But I'm impressed by the ability to transfer, you know, and quick action. You know, not
Absolutely.
just, well, we're going to go through the process and, you know, we'll have some hearing and maybe there'll be some help for you along the way. It sounds like there's pretty quick response and effort to help the victim be removed from the situation, avoid retaliation, that kind of thing. Correct?
Absolutely.
I think it's important to note, because that is the case now, that when viewers are working with a veteran, though, when they're working with somebody that may have experienced sexual assault many years ago or even 2 years ago, those protections were not all in place. So individuals were not able to always access Special Victims Counsel. In fact, if they interacted with the prosecutor for a case at all, they could give them no legal advice whatsoever. So that's why the Special Victims Counsel was created, or the legal support was created. Additionally, they were not always given the option to transfer or to ask that the perpetrator be transferred. Typically, it was the victim that had to be transferred, and so they were leaving their network of support. So this gives some context, because if someone's talking to somebody that, or working with someone that experienced a sexual assault many years ago, there's going to be reasons why they may have resistance to the system, the process, may not feel supported completely because many of those protections have only been put in place in the last 2 years or 3 years.
Let's talk a little bit about the SARC. There's been a few mentions of the SARC. Can someone fill us in on what that is, what it encompasses? Is that relatively new as well? Can you comment on that, Lindsey?
I think, well, I'll offer a few comments, and then I
Okay.
think Anne is a
Anne?
great,
Okay.
Anne really has her subject matter down.
Okay.
The SARC is a sexual assault response coordinator, so this is within each commander installation, there is a sexual assault and response program, and then the SARC is assigned to the commander of the installation to provide the coordination of resources for victims of sexual assault. So that includes assigning a victims advocate, interacting with the command on behalf of the victim, interacting with law enforcement where necessary, or making sure that they get mental health care and healthcare options available to them. And so that person is really kind of coordinating the entire effort for the individual or individuals that are experiencing this. But again, would be great.
Okay, Anne, we'd like to hear from you on this.
You said it all. Before we had the SARC and before the program was stood up in 2005, 2006, we had the Victim Witness Assistance Program on, I would venture to say, every installation. And that was a person that was trying to, on our installation, she was handling magistrate court, she was handling survivors, she was doing it all. So now to have dedicated individuals that deal specifically and only with sexual assault, and because it's not just a one-pronged approach to assisting survivors, there are so many different elements that go into making sure that the survivor is whole. And having that individual with the assistance of the victim advocates now that go through a 40-some-odd hour training, as well as go through bystander intervention training, as well as go through ongoing education through NOVA certification, these individuals are so in tune with the needs of the survivor, yet every survivor is different. So knowing all the elements that are available to individuals on an installation and in the community has strengthened the program, and the SARC is on every installation where they have a dedicated SARC is crucial, I think, in moving this program along. One thing that I would like to see trained or changed in the future is that they don't make this a collateral duty, that they have dedicated SARCs on every single installation, because it does take so much time to work with survivors. And we want the report numbers to go up because we want people to come forward. We want people to get help so that they're not suffering in silence. And I think SARCs need to also take it upon themselves, which they do locally and they do around in other areas as well, is to become entrenched in the community in which they live and where their installation is. And SARCs that oversee, like in the Guard, that oversee huge areas, need to develop a connection with rape crisis centers and victim witness offices now, because of 822545, with local district attorney's offices, to be connected in their service areas, so that when a veteran does come forward, they know exactly who and where and how and why to get that person the help that is needed.
Tremendous amount of help available. I'm struck by the fact that all of these services are available kind of once we have a victim. What more can be done about prevention? I think, Lindsey, you mentioned that early on in your remarks as kind of a challenge, but we have dedicated resources on the installations, good response, come forward, make your report, but we want to prevent this crime. So what more can we be doing, either in our respective areas or collaboratively, to really put an end to this senseless, needless victimization?
Well, it's hard for me to personally to speak for the military culture. I know in civilian culture, when we're talking about prevention, and we frequently talk about where we're putting that responsibility and kind of shifting that responsibility to the perpetrators or potential perpetrators, and not to isolate men, because men aren't the only perpetrators of sexual violence, that utilizing the influence and power of men to really become advocates for the cause, to really stand up for women, to really be at the forefront, be the face of violence prevention. And that's, I think, really been effective. And in bringing up our young men, really teaching them about respecting women, respecting boundaries. If you don't have a clear yes, then it's no, and teaching those messages.
And Anne, I know you do a lot of training, so can you comment on this whole issue of what more can we do to prevent sexual violence?
I think that we need to hold people accountable. I think that we need to have stronger punishments. I think that we need to not re-victimize a survivor that comes forward, because as a society, and not just, not as the people that are doing the work, but as a society, we unfortunately do that, which prohibits or keeps people from coming forward. It holds them back. So we need to send a message to the perpetrators that are perpetrating these crimes that we take this seriously. We need to aggressively prosecute. We need to hold them accountable, because it's not okay. It's not okay for a survivor to be the one that's basically vilified in the prosecutorial process. And that's both on the military side and on the civilian side. And that if in a perfect world, if I could solve it, that's what I would do. I would make sure that people were held accountable, because too many people are getting away with it, and it's sending the message that rape's really not a big deal. It's a he said, she said. It's, why deal with it? And we need to deal with it, and we need to send a message. And I really do think that we have come such a long way from the military that my husband joined in 1983 to where we are now. We have seen tremendous strides. We've taken some steps back along the way, but we really have made tremendous strides. And I think that in the military, we need to celebrate those accomplishments, but we can't stop moving forward. And I think the military also needs to continue to take their cues from the civilian side, the civilian world, and the work that's being done in communities and with nonprofits and at the state level with our coalition, to learn from the mistakes that we've already made as they move forward in providing support and treatment for survivors of sexual assault in the military.
Okay,
So
Lindsey,
stiffer penalties, I'm off my soapbox now. That's what we need.
excellent. I think Lindsey wants to weigh in on this one.
Well, there's some things happening right now that, first of all, we should all be advocates. We should be advocates for change in American culture, change in global culture, change in military culture in the U.S. Armed Forces, that makes all of this more equitable, so that women feel more comfortable moving in society without fear of sexual assault. Because certainly, unfortunately, in the military, women tend to be at much greater risk of sexual assault than men do, although men are definitely victims of sexual assault as well. So if we do that, if we encourage more women to join the military, if we encourage a more equitable military service, I think we will see the numbers of sexual assault go down. But also, we can advocate for change within the Department of Defense. Right now, Department of Defense is unable to track military sex offenders. There is no parity database that actually, like a national sex offender database like we have in civilian society. So Congresswoman Jackie Speier has introduced a bill, the Military Track Act, which would give Department of Defense jurisdiction to be able to track offenders. It would require the Department of Defense actually create a database to track military sexual assault offenders. And that's really important because as civilians, we have to remember that if somebody is a serial rapist in the military, they will be a serial rapist when they get out of the military, and they will not necessarily be tracked. They will not necessarily be in jail or prison or made to register as a sex offender. They can fall through the cracks, and they do. And so it's important that we advocate that this is a public safety issue. This is a public health problem, that we see these same individuals getting out of the military and really coming into our communities. Additionally, we also see the huge impact and public health impact of how survivors are sometimes not seeking services or getting the services that they need to move on with their lives, and that's a huge problem as well. So we can be advocates. We can be advocates for change within the military. We can be advocates for better supporting survivors once they come back home to us.
Great. I want to move now to some questions that we have from the audience, and remind those of you that are listening or watching that you can submit your questions through YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or at publicaffairs@vcgcb.ca.gov. So let us hear from you. We have a question from Twitter. How can we improve military sexual assault investigations in terms of victim blaming? I will let any of our three panelists comment on that. Anyone want to take that one on?
I think cultural competency is key. Just as advocates and supportive personnel get and victims advocates get training about how to make sure that they're really responsible to supporting the survivor. The same would be true in the military. Don't assume that the person is lying. Don't assume that this was a he said, she said. Don't assume even that this was a case of lack of consent. A lot of the prevention efforts in the military right now are focusing on reducing the rates of alcohol consumption. They're also focusing on whether or not consent is given. Those are very important because those do constitute a large percentage of the cases reported. However, there are also cases of true victimization of predatory sexual practices, of people really taking advantage of and assaulting violently people in the military. So don't assume that you know what exactly took place. I would say if you're a victim's advocate, if you're working with these individuals, really handle the situation delicately so that you can avoid the victim blaming. We see a lot of victim blaming in terms of little things like, well, people aren't accessing services and they're not filing an unrestricted report. How can we help them? Really just remember that you need to adopt the survivor's perspective in this case, and that because it's the military, there's so many nuanced cultural issues, there's so many circumstances of people feeling retaliated against by their peers, by their chain of command, by their coworkers, that you just can't assume that the person's not doing all they can to overcome this incident. Okay. Anne or Mica, would you like to comment on this? Again, the question is, can you talk more about changes? I'm sorry, don't do that one. How can we improve military sexual assault investigations in terms of victim blaming? Anne, do you have any comments on that one?
Well, just from my experience in working with the local installation and the way that they investigate, you know, they're going to be, just like in the civilian sector, there are going to be good investigators and bad investigators. And I think there needs to be, I don't know exactly how many hours of training agents receive on investigating a sexual assault or interviewing a survivor of sexual assault or on that level. But I would, just from experience, I would say I think they need a bit more training. And I think that training needs to be ongoing. And I think there needs to be a greater understanding of victimology and working with a survivor of sexual violence. And yeah, that's it. I just think that there needs to be increased training for all agents that are given the responsibility or moved into the position of becoming an agent, such as whether it be NCIS or OSI or whatever investigative arm there is on the installation. They need deeper investigative tools and interviewing lessons in working with survivors of sexual violence.
Okay, thank you. Well stated. Our next question also comes from Twitter, and this question is, can you talk more about changes in males feeling comfortable reporting a sexual assault?
Well, there have been a few men who have come forward, male veterans who have testified before Congress, who have started to participate actively and openly in the advocacy for the prevention and treatment of sexual violence in the military and sexual assault in the military. But so much more, I think, needs to be done. I still think that this is a huge stigma that is widely underreported with men who serve in the military, unfortunately. And that continues in that we often default to the victim being a woman, and we often default to housing programs that advocate for sexual assault within the world of women. And I think that in some ways puts up barriers for men to report and to seek services. So we definitely need to take a more gender neutral lens to sexual assault in the military and in the veterans community, and understand that this could also happen to men. And then, of course, this in no way denotes, just as it doesn't with women, anything about the person or the personal character or characteristics of the individual. It has everything to do with power, with really violence, and nothing to do with the individual. So if we can kind of demystify those stigmas, we can go a long way to getting more men to feel comfortable in helping to prevent this, and then also reporting if they've been affected by it.
Anne, would you like to comment on this?
I would agree. I think that we need to continue to talk about it. One of the first things that we mentioned when we started today was the barriers to reporting were that we weren't talking about it. And just as in the mid-70s, when the women's movement started and the rape crisis movement started, we started because we were talking about it. And look how far we've come since the mid-70s. So giving men especially permission to talk about it in a safe environment and in a safe place to disclose, in a safe place to report and seek help, and making sure that we have the processes and the programs in place specifically targeted for male survivors is important. And the more that we educate individuals that those processes are in place, the more men will come forward and start seeking help, because of the stigma that's attached to sexual assault. That's what's holding them back. So us advocates and us in the field breaking down those barriers will go a long way in supporting male survivors of sexual assault in the military, so that they can come forward and they know that they're safe, and they know that they're going to be taken care of and protected.
Right, and I assume your earlier comments about training for investigators certainly holds true in this case as well.
Absolutely.
All right, another question that's coming from our audience, this time through email. The question is, if you report military sexual assault of a friend, can you remain anonymous?
I don't know.
All right,
That's
Lindsey Sin, she does not know.
Anne. Yeah.
Anne, do you have any experience with this?
Well, let me think about that for a second.
Okay.
No, you can't, because that, I believe this is how it is, and I could be wrong, so I apologize. But for example, if that survivor wanted to make a restricted report, that restricted report is no longer on the table because someone else knows. Okay. Can the friend remain anonymous? I'd like to say yes, but I don't think that that's going to be possible in the military, because I think through the investigative process, that friend is going to be basically uncovered.
I would recommend that the friend reach out to the victim's advocate or the SARC.
Or the SARC.
Because at that point, it's still just between the trained professional that can kind of advise them about what they may want to do next. So definitely reach out to the SARC, reach out to the victim's advocate. They keep that confidential to a degree, but where it goes in the process next, unfortunately, I don't know. Maybe we can get back to that.
Okay, something to work on in the future. We're coming up to the end of our time together, but before I ask my panelists to share any final comments or thoughts, I just want to also remind all of our viewers and listeners that this session has been recorded and it will be available for future viewing on YouTube. And you can access that, of course, through our website at calvcp.ca.gov. So in our few minutes that we have left together, let me ask, maybe we'll start with Mica. Any final thoughts about our conversation today?
Well, we've been talking a lot about raising awareness and training and informing both civilian and particularly for today military members about compensation program, about their rights, about resources that are available to them. So what I want to leave you with is, you know, here in California, there are many options to get very direct help, and that's through the victim witness offices. So if you've been a victim of military sexual assault or a victim of a crime, I highly encourage you to reach out to your local victim witness office, ask for an advocate, speak with them, talk to them. They will help you submit your application with us. The other piece to that is training. Training is available throughout California, and we do outreach training either through our headquarters office here in the Sacramento area or through the victim witness offices, so they can come to your organization and talk to you about this bill and how it's changed and what we're doing to get the word out, as well as all the other benefits that are available through CalVCP. And then we also have a monthly webinar hosted through a staff member here and for advocates, community-based advocates, victim witness advocates. So if that's something that you'd like to be a part of, just reach out to us, give us your contact information, and we'll get you on our distribution list.
Okay, Lindsey.
Well, certainly resources. This is probably, just as Mica's saying, the most valuable tool, hopefully, that you're going to get today is resources. If you're trying to direct somebody that you're working with directly who is a survivor of sexual assault in the military, then certainly there's resources available to you from the Sexual Assault Response Coordinator or the SAPRO program of that military base or installation or that branch of the service. You can type a very easy Google search, SAPRO, SHARP, SARC, any of those keywords, or just Sexual Assault Coordinator in that branch of military service, and you'll be directed to the right resources for that branch. Additionally, you can access va.gov for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. From that website, you can get information about military sexual trauma, which is the term the VA uses to discuss the variety of health and mental health issues that someone may have suffered as a result of a sexual assault in the military. There are MST coordinators, military sexual trauma coordinators within the VA. There are also women veteran program managers at each of the healthcare facilities, so that you can contact them directly through the Women's Coordinated Care Program, and they can direct you to some of those resources. And then easiest of all, you can contact our office, calvet.ca.gov. You can contact our email, womenveterans@calvet.ca.gov, to ask questions, and we can help you direct you to some of those resources. A great toolkit for organizations trying to work with survivors of military sexual assault is the toolkit from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. Acronym is NSVRC, very long. National Sexual Violence Resource Center. They have a toolkit that is made available to individuals to download. We also have a toolkit on our website for women veterans if you want to know more about women who serve and some of the resources available to them. There's a couple of national nonprofits that do great work around this as well. Protect Our Defenders is, I think it's protectourdefenders.org, is focused on military sexual assault. There's also SWAN, which is the Service Women's Action Network. So SWAN, I think it's swan.org. It's also a good resource to get more information for survivors and more information for organizations who want to support survivors.
Anne, before you give us your closing thoughts, we do have one final question from a member of our audience, and I want to make sure that we get to that in the time we have remaining. This comes from Robin, who asks, what about military spouses who report sexual assault and get the runaround from command?
Unfortunately, I have seen that happen, and they still should be and need to be connected with their SARC as well as their local community partners. Once again, this gets back to training and changing the culture and people having a clear understanding of what sexual violence is. And you know, because of the transient nature of the military and because people are moving from place to place and there's not the stability like you might find in the local community with the nonprofit, and because people come from all over the world, everybody comes with a different background and a different way of learning and a way of dealing. And it's up to us as service providers to make sure that we are constantly educating individuals on what sexual violence is, because if that commander is giving that spouse the runaround, then perhaps some additional training for that commander in sensitivity and awareness and victimology and all those things that go into it would be beneficial. So, you know, I think that's important. I know that the SARCs are always meeting with the commanders. The SARCs are one of the first people that the new commander will meet with when they get on when they come to an installation. But the local community needs to make sure that they're connected with that commander as well, so that that commander understands clearly what's available. And as a gentle reminder to talk about the process of healing for a sexual assault survivor.
All right. Thank you.
They can also they can contact me directly if there's ways that we can connect them with the sexual assault response coordinator here in California. We can definitely do that. Yes, unfortunately, a lot of the system in place is designed for active duty members who are the survivors or the victims, not the spouses. But there could be some information that can be given to the spouses to assist them, in addition to obviously contacting your local rape crisis center or local law enforcement to begin an investigation if necessary, because that military member should still be held accountable through the process of the sexual assault prosecution, because they are active duty military. So they still need to be held accountable, hopefully, for their actions, and that ball may begin to be rolled if the individual contacts a local law enforcement or a rape crisis center in their area.
And adult dependents of an active duty member are eligible for a restricted report as well as an unrestricted report. So they're eligible for the same reporting options and assistance on an installation. So we need to make sure that we need to stay vigilant in our work to make sure that understanding is clear.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank our panelists, Mica, Anne, and Lindsey. We've talked a lot about how many steps we've taken. We've talked about challenges. We've talked about barriers. There's still work to be done, but I encourage you to refer others to this webcast so that they too may benefit from the discussion today. And remember, as Lindsey has said, there are resources available. So I want to thank all of you for participating today. Those of you that have submitted questions, I hope that we've been responsive to your interests, and I thank you for sending your questions in to us. And again, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to our next digital town hall.
Thank you.